they seem to be pulling back and blaming others for their failure to implement the strategy that they embraced last March. It's time for President Obama to make good on his promise. The White House must stop dithering while America's armed forces are in danger.
What Vice President Cheney calls dithering, President Obama calls his solemn responsibility to the men and women in uniform and to the American public. I think we've all seen what happens when somebody doesn't take that responsibility seriously.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney taking on the administration again this week, saying that the Bush administration had a plan, that they had a review on Afghanistan. They handed it over to the Obama team, and that's essentially what the Obama team, he alleges, signed on to in March when the president came out with the strategy. Now, Vice President Joe Biden was overseas today. He called Cheney's remarks when he was flying back on Air Force 2, and there you see him earlier in the week. He called Cheney's remarks and the whole plan, as Cheney recalled it, irrelevant, because Biden says he traveled to Afghanistan in January and redid the whole review. This is your choice for the first lightning round topic. We're back with the panel. Charles.
The history of this decision is less important than the fact that the president is agonizing in public. A president ought to think long and hard about a strategy about war. There's nothing wrong with that. But agonizing in public, leaving allies hanging, as we saw in the NATO meeting today where all the others are waiting to hear what the United States is going to do, leaving the Afghans hanging, leaving everybody in Pakistan hanging on this, as a president thinks is a mistake. If you want to have a private consultation, do it. But it's Obama's own strategy, and he's responsible. And if he wants a reconsideration, it should be done in quiet and then have an announcement.
Juan.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is a political battle. It's Vice President Cheney saying they had this thing under control. You hear the argument coming from the administration that, in fact, it was 8 years of drift. They didn't put the necessary troops in there while they were in the wrong war, as they call it, in Iraq, versus the necessary wars. President Obama describes what's going on right now in Afghanistan. So you get people like Rahm Emanuel, the White House Chief of Staff, saying, you know what, the consideration of political, strategic, all of those issues have changed as issues have changed on the ground, and that's why we have this ongoing thing. And so dithering, waffling, and then for Gibbs to come back and blame Cheney, it's really, you know, I mean, that's not worthy of the solemn, as he used his word, the solemn nature of what is being considered here.
But the history on this does matter. I mean, the history, one person's right and one person's not. Rahm Emanuel said last weekend that the Bush administration never asked these questions. In fact, the Bush administration did ask these questions. There was something that took 2 months from mid-September to mid-November called the Loot Review. I interviewed Elliot Cohen, who was a senior counselor to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. He was a key participant in this panel. He said they studied it intensively. They passed on the recommendations to the Obama administration. What Rahm Emanuel said is just flat wrong.
Quick answers on Iran and what's happening with them pushing back with this plan to send enriched uranium to Russia and France.
None of this matters. It would be nice if it did. None of this matters. We know what Iran wants because we've been watching them for decades. This is all details.
Well,
I just think it's very disappointing unless they hold on to their promise to allow the inspectors in, to allow the world to see exactly what they're doing. They're saying this stuff is for medical purposes, but once it gets back to them, it could be further enriched for weaponry.
And the added uncertainty is we have no idea how much hidden enriched uranium Iran has. This is a shell game. It's a way to extend negotiations and give them time.
A lightning, bring your own comment. Charles.
Well, this airplane that overshot Minneapolis by an hour and a half, the speculation is that the pilots were asleep. Well, my question is, during that hour and a half, what were the flight attendants doing? Now, I'm not an aviation expert. I'm just asking it as an innocent and concerned citizen.
Juan.
Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin this week refused to endorse the Republican candidate in the New York 23rd Congressional District election, Didi Skaza-Faza.
Pretty good.
And what has happened in that race is really intriguing because now all of a sudden the Republican, Skaza-Faza, who is down to Bill Owens, the Democrat, and because Palin's endorsement has gone to David Hoffman, the independent, in that race. And so what we're seeing here is literally people not meeting some kind of litmus test for how conservative you have to be to please Sarah Palin and stay inside a very limited tent. I think it's self-defeating.
It's not a limited tent. Skazafava is a liberal. She might as well be a Democrat and would be a liberal Democrat. There was a bigger outrage associated with this race this week. Our reporter from our magazine, John McCormick, went up to cover the race, politely asked the candidate several questions at an open public meeting, and the campaign called the police on John McCormick, something that I think even the Associated Press said was unwarranted.
2 lightning round topics on 1 New York race. That's pretty interesting. And, of course, your choice. You can vote Wednesday on the online show for next Friday's first topic in the lightning round panel. Thank you. That is it for the panel, but stay tuned for what was billed as a new look for one political party.